Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I'm very excited to have actor Robert Woods joining me. And Bob played Dr. David Spencer, the original fiancé of Mary Ellen. And he proceeded to do 8 episodes, including in season 5, The Vigil and The Firestorm, and the 2-part special, The Wedding. Then in season 6, he was in the episode The Anniversary. And in season 7, he was in the episode The Obsession, The Pinup, and The Attack. Please welcome Robert Woods. All right. Where shall we start?
Let's see. What episode? We can start with this. Well, I'll keep that for later.
I actually don't have the lunchbox. I have no. I didn't collect much on the memorabilia, so I don't have some of those things.
I found this in an antique store. I thought you gotta do it. I mean, come on.
We're officially antiques.
Oh, I know. When this goes back, well, I mean, you're still in overalls in this one. This is early on. This is before you became a nursery. I think you've got a new calf here, and the whole family's around leaning on the fence and everything.
Yeah. Early seasons. Yeah.
What a show.
Right. Well, you entered in season 2. No,
what?
Season 5, episode 2.
Yeah.
Read my writing. It's too small. I know this was when you joined and came on board as Dr. David Spencer, that it was very early in your career. So,
very.
Yeah. So share with everyone about.
Well, that's the second thing I ever done. The first one was an episode of City of Angels, and it had been canceled. And there was a 2-line role called The Boy. I think I told you about that. My wardrobe tag, Robert Woods, Boy. And I thought, I don't care. And that was on my trailer, because I thought, here I'm Universal and I've got a trailer. So that was cool. And we'd already done a location out in the valley, and Ralph Sininsky was directing it. And then we did the interiors. That's where I found the luggage tag, or I keep calling it luggage tag, but it's a wardrobe tag, and I kept it. I've still got it in there in the office. But Ralph was very instrumental in me ever getting a break or anything, and just studying with him in this film actors workshop out in Burbank at the Burbank Studios, and getting to know him. That was a real boost for me. I still may be a waiter in Marina Del Rey if it wasn't for Ralph.
Well, what was the audition process like for you for the Waltons?
Well, I remember when I went there, the offices were on this street that since they've expanded the studio, that street is it's still a street, but you can't even see it from the boulevard and all that. And the offices were over there. And I went in for the audition. First thing, it's like, where's your men's room? So I went in there, and I was looking at this little decal on the mirror when I walked by, and it said "Smoke OPs." And so I thought, I kind of chuckled at that. And then I went over, did my thing, and so another guy came in, he did his thing, and then we're at the sink washing our hands. I said, this is really funny. See this, smoke OPs? You know what that means? He said, no. I said, it means smoke other people's. So you're bumming cigarettes all the time. He kind of chuckled and he left. So then I went down the hall to the offices, and I was waiting. And when I went in to read, who am I sitting across from? But Earl Hamner, the guy in the men's room.
Oh.
And we chuckled about smoke OPs. Yeah. So anyway, that was it. And then the next thing I knew, I got the call, and needless to say, I was excited because we worked on the Film Actors Workshop, had classrooms there and everything. So we were always seeing you guys in the commissary and and then wandering over trying to see what was going on back at the house, wherever they were shooting, just to go and, especially if it was an exterior, we could go over and watch it. So studying at the Burbank studios, and then my first jobs, certainly the second job at least, on the Waltons, the start of my little run there. You know, it was a special place, special time for me. 76, I think it was. And the Olympics were going on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember this, but we used to go to McDonald's for lunch. And they had this whole thing going with the Olympics where you could win a order of fries or something if you had the right scratch off thing. And so that was in 76. Very cool time.
When you went in for the audition, at what point did you know that this was going to be a character that, like, more than one episode?
Well, it wasn't, I guess when I got hired, it was for 3 episodes or something. And there was an interim. I think they just wrote something in the book burning was in between.
Okay. Yeah.
I forget. Yeah. The wedding and an initial episode. I think it had something to do with Grandma, or maybe it was Will Gear having a heart attack or something. Ellen Corby.
It was,
I don't know.
Ellen Corby. It was Grandma when I had, I believe, misdiagnosed. I thought she just had the flu, and it was appendicitis, and so I had messed it up.
Peritonitis and all.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the vigil.
Yes, the vigil.
Right.
And somewhere I still have the card that I sent around to people. Is the vigil, the book burning, and then the wedding on the card, and you'd send it around town to all the casting directors and everything. Yeah.
So how was it then making that shift from coming, like watching it as a student, as you went around the lot, to actually then being on the set with us?
Well, yeah, that was, for me, it was kind of nerve wracking. I was a wreck nerve wise. I mean, I think we were talking about my first cue to come onto the set was around the corner in a hallway in the hospital. And they said, just wait there and your light will come on. And then you'll, when you see that, then you make your entrance around the corner. I said, okay. So I was there, action, waiting. And then they say, cut. Did you see the light come on? I couldn't see a light anywhere. Well, it was right up here. It was right, So, and I don't know, it wasn't real bright or something. I wasn't real bright at that time. I was still here. And but that was it. And then you and Richard and I had some scenes. But Will Gear said, so you're the young doctor. I guess you're going to be part of the family, huh? And I said, not that I know it. He said, oh, she's getting married this year. You didn't know that? I said, no. So
also, sorry.
I had a lot of excitement going on there for a while, but then getting to go back and making moves on you after you were married, and then probably got some bad mail on that one, but it was just an exciting time for me.
Were there particular members of the cast or crew that were helpful in, making you feel more comfortable or helping with the nerves?
Well, Will was real. He was real welcoming, and we went up to Theatricum Botanicum, I think, his theater company.
Right.
And just a jovial, nice guy. So he was, and everybody was really pleasant. It was a real kind of a family within the family and everything, but everybody was just great, and it was comfortable. So,
well, that had to be nice for a situation when you're starting off to be on a set like ours. Into our 5th season, where we were also in the groove and easy with it.
Yeah, it was an interesting time for me, trying to overcome all the shakes and shake, rattle, and roll was just something.
So the various different technical things that I don't know how much of that Ralph Sininsky took you guys through in terms of marks and cue lights, which clearly he hadn't.
No, I never had anything like that. But when I was in college, I majored in radio and TV production and then a little bit of film. Our films, I did a film on Super 8 starring my wife, called Dream Girl, and with my best friend and roommate in college, one of my fraternity brothers, George Bryson. So I was filming them on a Super 8 and then added some music later. That was one of the first film classes I took. So.
Cool.
So I could understand around the set as far as, just camera angles and one thing or another.
Where did you grow up? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What was that?
I was born in Bell Gardens, California. Okay. Born in Maywood Hospital. We lived on Gage Avenue in Bell Gardens in some apartments. So I grew up there. My dad was a dry cleaner, and my mom, she was a cashier in Huntington Park at a diner. And so that's where it was, Bell Gardens, California. And then they bought a house out in Lakewood, California, a new development. And that was it was like Lakewood Tomorrow City Today. And every grade school had a park across the street. Mm. And every kid that wanted to be on a team could be on a team in that park. So it was a great place to grow up. I still have great memories of it and still have friends that I went all through grade school, junior high school, and then on to college at Long Beach State. So that was, and then we got to live in one of my favorite places with Belmont Shore in Long Beach. It's a little village in Long Beach. And so that was a dream come true. After Lloyd and I got married, our first apartment was there. And it was fun to grow up there. Where'd you grow up? Were you from California?
Yeah, I was born in Santa Monica and grew up pretty much in the Valley. Right. Yeah, so I was a Valley girl. Before Valley girls were Valley girls.
Our first house was in the Valley on Addison that we bought after I started working and we was working. But we were working on opposite coasts and traveling, but that was our first house in the Valley. Southern California, that's all I knew.
Yeah. Well, I know you were in the military. Mm-hmm. Was that after college, during college? Did you enlist? Were you drafted?
It was right in the middle of college. 2 years in, I joined a fraternity. I was having a great time. I was in radio and television production, and I did well in those classes and everything else, like languages, whatever. You didn't have to take a language, but I ended up, I don't know. It was just a difficult time for me between, say, 18 and 20, and partying and being in living at the house and stuff, fraternity house. So I ended up 1A, which was in the draft. And when you're 1A, that means, get your little ditty bag ready because it's a good chance the next wave when they need somebody, you're going to go. And so I went, and then in the induction station, this guy came up and it was like an orientation where different people are speaking about different, what you call an MOS, military occupation school. What you learn, where you go. So in walks this guy from Special Forces, Green Beret, So he walks in and he just looked around. He said, "Anybody here have any questions about Special Forces?" Well, everybody immediately was like this. They didn't want to know. Mm. So he said, "Yeah, that's what I thought." He just walked and stood in the back. So I don't know if there was a break, whatever. I got over next to him. I said, "I have a couple of questions for you." He said, "Come with me." I said, "Why? I just have a couple of things." He said, "Come with me. If you can't pass a battery of tests, you're wasting my time and yours." So I said, "Well, I'm here with these, the other guys in the platoon." He said, "Just don't worry about that. I'll take care of that. Come on." So he took me right out, and I sat for about the next, I don't know if it was 4 or 6 hours. It seemed like the rest was certainly the rest of the day, just taking a battery of tests. And we'd already had all these tests going in where people, they were trying to get an idea what where you would fit in, I suppose, or something. Whatever it was, I'd passed, and he said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, right now I'm not too crazy about the Army, so maybe I just want to let me go through basic, and can we talk again after that?" He said, "No, I don't want you wasting your time or mine. I need an answer right now." So I said, "Okay, all right, I'll do it." So bang, I was filling out paperwork. I was separated, not discharged yet, but separated as a U.S., which you were a U.S. You were a draftee, and then there was an RA, regular Army, which was a 3-year commitment, not a 2-year commitment. So the next thing you know, I had it on another year and started going through the process. Basic training, AIT.
What's AIT?
My advanced individual training, and I was in communications, so I was going through radio operators. I hated it. I had to learn Morse code. And then you'd have to keep learning faster and faster until you could send and receive 15 groups a minute. It was painful, but I did that, and then went on to parachute training at Fort Benning, and at Fort Bragg, and started SF there, which, the first phase, you parachute into this little compound, which was just for this first phase of training, and living in one big tent, porta potties, bunks with just collapsible little beds. And so 4 weeks there, then you went through your MOS. So it was radio, learning Morse code, which drives you crazy. And then all these other radios. And then going to the advanced course, which ends in a big exercise. And everybody, all the different MOSs are there, and they're saying, "Okay, you're fired from that, and you're taking over this," and blah, blah. And at the end, ended up graduating, and then it came down to reading orders of which individual groups we were going to. And they were calling, it seemed like every radio operator was going to the 5th Special Forces Group. Every radio operator, what was the other MOS? But it was all the commo guys. And whatever the other one was, I was in communication, so I got orders for Vietnam. And then, so that's how I got over there. It's a long, shaggy dog story.
Yeah. Well, that whole experience is perhaps for another time, to the degree that it's something you share or retell, or I'm so clueless. Obviously, I have no.
Yeah. I've got my workshop out in the garage has pictures. There's not many. I've got a page out of the TV guide for the Waltons. A buddy of mine in Seal Beach, California, had a frame shop, and I went in. He'd taken and done all kinds of matting around it. And down at the bottom, it said, I got billing. That's another thing. I never really understood how important billing is, but that was my first. I got a guest starring role. But I don't know if you remember. I was going by Robert Merritt Woods because there was another Robert Woods.
Yeah.
So I used my dad's first name as a middle name. And then I had a manager, and he said, it's just too long. Even on the crawl, it had to be 2 lines. It wasn't just. So then he persuaded me to become Christopher Woods. I think I even did one of the episodes on your show as Christopher Woods. And when I got there, Reynolds.
Bob
Reynolds.
Bill Reynolds, our makeup
Bill
artist,
Reynolds, Bill Reynolds, in makeup. And he said, what's, and I said, it's a long story. So, and then I was doing something, and somebody was yelling, Chris. And I finally looked around just to see who was making all the noise. He was looking right at me. And so at that point is when I said, I'm no longer Christopher Wood. I'm going to use my own name with a middle initial. He said, well, it's going to be more. I said, I don't care. I got enough on my mind. If you're trying to go to work and remember what to say, then the last thing you want to have to remember is who you are. So let's solve one problem here. So that's why I went from Robert Merritt Woods to my own name. But
you finally found.
Yeah, but that was an exciting. yeah, finally. Yeah.
Well, it was interesting that you came into the Waltons in sort of the war years, because obviously the firestorm, was a very sort of intense precursor to. Yeah, we were about a year away because we didn't really get into the war years until season 7. Was much more involved. So you had some episodes in season 7, but yeah.
Because I remember the first 3 very well. I remember going back and being in an elevator and trying to put a move on you again. No, that didn't go over very well.
I think that was the anniversary. That was, I think, season 6 in the anniversary because that was the only episode you had in season 6. And I think that was when you put the moves on me or tried to.
Yeah, gave it a shot.
Yeah.
Gotta take a shot.
Curt was already gone. So season 6, he joined the Army Medical Corps. And then season 7 was when he was killed at Pearl Harbor. So, and you had 3 episodes in season 7. You had the obsession when Mary Ellen gets hooked on pills, and you were helping facilitate that at first. I was trying to get through my nursing exams and wanted some pills to help me stay awake or study. And you warned me to be careful with it. And of course, I wasn't. I got hooked, and we had to go through that. And then you were in the episode The Pinup, and I don't remember what that was about. There must have just been some hospital scenes.
Yeah, I don't remember then either. Yeah.
And then the attack when Godsey had his heart attack and he was being cared for at the hospital, and you and I were part of that care team.
Yeah, I remember when Godsey, I remember his heart attack. I always thought I remembered everything, but God.
It's a long time ago.
I know.
And I've recently watched these again, so that's the only reason why I remember them. But I kind of wondered after that, and since Curt was then gone and they had gotten to a point where finally Mary Ellen was starting to contemplate dating again, and because they brought your character back in, I thought, oh, well, maybe they were considering getting Mary Ellen and David back together.
Full circle.
Yeah. And then you got another full-time job, and you were no longer an option.
Oh, no, I was off to New York. That would have been cool. But I tell you, One Life turned out to be pretty cool too, because it ran for as long as it did. I left after 6 years and came back to California, and then we were trying to start a family. We'd gotten divorced, but she was living in California. I was living in New York. We ended up divorced, but then said, well, maybe come back here, spend some time, let's work it out. And then I decided I'm going to have steady, I realized how lucky I was really as an actor to get a job as steady and to be a member of one of the core families on the show. And I thought, I'm just going to go back until they either carry me out or throw me out. But this is it. That's my career move. So, and I can't say I regret it. It was, I worked with some neat guys too. Phil Carey and Clint Ritchie. Phil Carey, do you remember Granny Goose potato chips?
Yeah.
Okay. He was Granny Goose, and he'd done all kinds of movies with Ward Bond and John Wayne, Operation Pacific, and Mr. Roberts he was in.
I remember him from one of my favorite films growing up, Calamity Jane.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
With Howard Keel and Doris Day. And what was fun was that I don't know if he ever did an episode of The Waltons, but Alan Ann McCleary, who played his love interest in Calamity Jane, did an episode or two of our show. And I remember being such a fan, going, "Oh my goodness, it's her from." So my mom watched all those musicals, and so I was very familiar with a lot of the musicals from that era.
Well, that's I felt that way when I started your show, and especially after, we'd always be back in the corner at lunchtime and everybody's in the commissary there at the Burbank Studios, and you guys are all in costume, and there's, and they'd have a lot of kids on the show at one time. Everybody'd be crowded in there, and other little kids running around, suspenders and one thing or another. Oh man, someday maybe.
And then someday came.
Yep.
I want to thank Bob for spending time with me here and sharing about his time on the Waltons and the rest of his career and his life. I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons, more Ask Judy, and more with Robert Woods. See you next time. Thanks for watching.